Money Guy family, we have a rare special episode today. We talk a lot about retirement on the Money Guy show, but rarely have we actually captured that specimen of a creature that has actually made the transition into retirement. So today, we have one of those rare people, and we're going to talk about surviving and thriving in your transition to retirement.
It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
Guys, this has been a collaboration that has been months in the making. Today, I'll go ahead and announce you. Okay. We have Fritz from Retirement Manifesto. If you guys haven't checked it out, Fritz does an incredible job. I think he is wired like us. He's analytical. He's also very goals-based. He's also the type of person that's nerdy enough that he wants to learn stuff and then share it with you. And I feel very honored to have you here, Fritz, because I've become a fan of your content, and I think it's awesome, the stuff you've shared. And I also want people to know, and this is the part, Fritz, where we said we're going to surprise you. You have such great content. I know when I was getting ready for show prep, one of the things we're going to be covering today is your 10 Commandments of Retirement. I want everybody to sign up with your email address, and we're going to be sharing some deliverable content that kind of summarizes some of Fritz's great advice that you've provided out there on your show. So please go out there and sign up. Go to moneyguy.com, and we just want your email address, and we're going to load you up.
And you guys know this. We don't often have guests on the show. It's pretty rare. So whenever we do have a guest on the show, it's a big deal. And the reason we want to have Fritz on here is we're excited. He's got some great stuff that he's going to share with us, and he has some perspective that's just going to be mind-blowing, that I think is going to be really fun to go through. So know that it's unique to have a guest on here, and we have very specifically and specially chose this guest because we think it's going to be incredibly valuable.
So I want to know, because it kind of lines up nicely with the Money Guy show. How did you get into, what's the inspiration for Retirement Manifesto?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, thanks for having me on your show. I've been a long-time listener. I listened 5 years before I was even, really getting serious about retirement. So even though you called me a nerdy specimen, I think, I'm still honored to be here. So
what a weird compliment to give our guest.
But thank you. So the question was what? I got way off track there.
What inspired you, and what's kind of the purpose, the why of the retirementmanifesto.com?
Yeah, really the interesting thing, I was about 3 years prior to retirement when I started it. And I've always been interested in blogs, podcasts, and I just decided to give one a go. And, it was really something that I was starting as kind of just let's try it and see what happens. Yeah. And it turns out that I have a passion for it. I love it. And my byline is helping people achieve a great retirement. And really what it's evolved into is just telling our story, things that we're addressing at various stages, approaching retirement now, entering and 100 days into retirement, and really trying to share not all about us, but here's the steps that we're taking and how they could apply to your situation. So it's really just become a way where we can share what we've done with the goals of trying to help other people, achieve a great retirement as well.
And so I want to make sure I heard this right. You just said that 100 days into retirement. So you are someone who has recently planned for retirement, entered into retirement, made it, and here you are 3+ months into retirement. So you the most uncertain, unsettling part of the journey for most folks is right in that swath that you're at right now.
Exactly. That's where I'm at. And it's been great. I mean, we'll get into it and talk about it, but I can't tell you how exciting it is to finally have achieved the goal and being retired. And it's really, it's one of those things you think about for decades, and to be just fresh into it, I'm still on the ceiling. It's really, I'm in the honeymoon phase. I recognize that, but it's a fantastic, really fantastic feeling.
That's awesome.
As I talked about in the intro, we talked to a lot of people about retirement, professionally as well as on the Money Guy show. And one of the hardest things that we talk to prospects, clients, as well as listeners of the Money Guy family is that it is hard to be good with money. You save, but then you retire, and there's no switch. It's not like you can just say, I'm going to now transition, go across this threshold, and become a saver, and go from saver to spender. I want to talk to you at some point today and get some meat of how do you make that transition. I think that is such a powerful thing, and that's why we titled it Surviving and Thriving in this Transition to Retirement. And here's what I think is also cool about having Fritz here is that And Bo, I don't have a cool Australian accent, but I do feel like, and I don't
really
know if it's
wish you would
because-
try one though.
or Jacques Cousteau for my older people, is that I do feel like we're like research scientists that have been on this vessel for months, tracking this elusive, the white whale, or say a Fritz megalodon or something like that. And we've chummed the water, so we've had our best chances of catching this specimen, as I've already said.
Nerdy specimen.
And now we really, once we get the tracker, we've loaded up the dart gun or the rifle, and we've put the beacon in there. Now we get to go into uncharted territory.
That's
we
right.
actually get to see what has this experience been like. And I think this is going to be very educational for our listeners, the Money Guy family, as well as, and I think we have a lot of young listeners as well. But I hope that they will stay with us, is because you have actually walked the walk. You've been successful. So I think there's even things you can pass down to younger people to show them the things that you maybe wish you'd have done, or the things you know you did well, and you want to make sure that younger savers know to do these things as well.
And I think one thing to add there, if you are younger and watching this or listening, you're not able to retire at age 55, which I did, without starting in your 20s, maybe 30s. So if you're young and you're thinking at some point, hey, I'd like to retire early, all the more reason that is valid.
Yeah.
It's absolutely, if you don't start early, you won't retire early.
That's right.
So, yeah.
By the way, 55 makes you kind of
Fire. No,
it does.
I was going to say it, but I didn't know if I was allowed to say that. That's part of the fire movement.
I mean,
right?
I think that's pretty legit. So here's the three things I had written just to keep us on point. Is that, and I've already mentioned this one, I want to give our audience direct access to what this journey and transition adventure has been like for you. We're going to cover that. The other thing is I want to talk about how do you minimize the anxiety, the emotional side of what volatility could happen to you in retirement. And then the last thing I had was also just sharing those favorite parts of your your 10 commandments of retirement. I thought that was so powerful. So let's jump right into this. I think that there's a lot of meaty stuff that we can get into. Talk to me first. That first week of retirement, what was that like?
Yeah. That's something I don't know if most people think like this, but I did. Especially as you get closer to retirement, you're like, what's it going to be like? Because it's kind of like starting your first day on a job. You don't know until you've crossed that threshold, and it takes a while to. I'm still not settled in, but the first day, or the first week, you know that you're done. But it still doesn't. It's not reality.
Right.
It kind of feels like a weekend, but
Feels like
you
you're
don't
on
have
vacation?
Yeah, but you don't have to go back to work.
Yeah.
So if you think of like a 2-week vacation, which is rare, right? But
Yeah.
if you take a 2-week vacation, how you feel like those first couple days where, man, I don't have to go back to work for 2 weeks. This is great.
Yeah.
Well, it's like that forever.
All the time.
All the time. It's different than anything else because you don't have to go back to work
Sure.
at the back end of it. But that's the closest analogy, is either a Saturday that lasts forever or a vacation that you're in the very beginning of and it's never going to end. It's fantastic.
Change creates fear. How much fear, how scared were you in this transition?
Yeah, not very much. I think because of my blog, I've been thinking about this exhaustively, which I would really encourage listeners to do. I think the more I've read a lot of things about retirement fails, and I've done some articles about it. And I think the biggest thing you can do as somebody approaching retirement is really spend a lot of time in the 2 to 3 year window before you get there to really think about what you want your retirement to be. And the more time you spend thinking about it before you get there, everything I've read, the smoother the transition, and that's certainly been the case for us. So was there fear? Yeah, but I would say I was 98% comfortable.
Okay.
And, 2% fear just because you've never done it before and you're not sure what it's going to be like. But for the most part, I was pretty comfortable going into it.
Key part, though, was the plan. Because you had the plan, they probably inoculated you from a lot of the fear that I think a lot of people probably suffer from.
Yeah, and something else I should add real quick is, this is the Money Guy show, so don't kick me under the table, but the planning is a lot more than just the money side.
Sure.
It's actually the more important planning side is the non-financial side.
Oh, no, we
really
tell that to
important.
people all the time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of the reasons, that's what's driven this passion project that's turned into what it has. So I want to kind of fast forward, because you're so busy. I know that first week you ate waffles like on a Wednesday. You swam in a lake. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out when in this, I know you said you're in your honeymoon, but there has to be a time that y'all are going to slow down. I mean, you have done so many things so quick, but I do think it's important. What is the first 60 days? We talked about the first week.
Yeah.
What is the first 60 days? Because you did a really cool post where you talked about the 3 things that you kind of expected, and then the 3 things that really caught you off guard. Kind of walk me through kind of those 60 days.
Yeah, and I guess I will talk about the things I expected and the things I didn't. I guess that's probably the easiest thing. I will say it's a process.
Yeah.
And as you get into 2 months in, things start settling into more of a routine. And we've settled into a bit of a routine now. We have certain things that we do to add some structure to the week. We're really focusing on fitness. So every morning we go to the gym, my wife and I together. And, there's things. Yeah. I don't do that PX stuff, though. You guys are insane. But no, but I think, what always intrigued me is what is going to happen in retirement that you weren't expecting, right? So I'll talk about the things I guess that I expected first. The first was, freedom is worth the cost. You sacrifice for a lot of years. It's a question of how much do you sacrifice. You look at some of the fire communities out in their 30s or 40s. Right. That's a totally different league than where I'm at. We lived well within our means, but we didn't really sacrifice. We were comfortable. We had frequent flyer miles. We took trips to Europe and things like that. But still, you've invested a huge amount of energy into making this happen. Was it really worth it? And I think the first thing that didn't surprise me that I was hoping for and was true was that the freedom is worth the cost to get there.
And we're doing this a little, but I just can't help. What percentage do you, if you over your entire working career, because it was like 33 years, I think.
Yep.
What percentage do you think you were saving of your gross income during the majority of that time? Just kind of average it out.
On average, probably 20 to 25%. The last 5 years, probably 40 plus.
See, I think that's beautiful because we talk about it all the time. For somebody that's just starting out, your goal should be 15 to 20%. Like that should be your aspirational goal. But if you are somebody who's thinking about that early retirement, stepping away, before, Social Security normal retirement age, like in your mid to late 60s, it probably is. You do need to kind of fall into that hyper saver 20 to 25% mode. And I think we're going to talk about this, but that saving like 40% right there in those last few years of retirement, I love that. And I'll tell you why I love that in a second.
So, but I do want to play devil's advocate a little bit because we talk about the FIRE movement a lot, and I pick on you about this a lot too, Bo. Is that I tell you because achievers try to accelerate to accomplish a goal. You want to go through your checklist and go through it. So I'm trying to figure out how to put this into words. In the fact that, do you feel like if you could do it all over again? Would you have saved, if you could have, 30% or 40% when you're in your 20s? Or do you think there's a balance? You have to be careful to make sure you experience your stage of life, too. Because I do worry about the balance between miser and being a prudent saver, because there's that whole Scrooge McDuck. You don't want to be that guy either. So
you can definitely save
what's the walk?
Much. And I'll tell you the way that I went about it, and my wife and I and our daughter. And I think it's the way that you balance those out. You can save too much. And we never felt like we went there. The way we did it is we'd started, when I first started, 6%, get your match, blah, blah, blah. And then as the increases come in every year, let's say you get a 3% raise, I would take 2% of that, add it to my 401k, so you go from 6 to 8.
Right.
And you still get a little bit more in your take home, so you feel like you can have a little bit of lifestyle inflation.
No, I love
it avoids that excessive lifestyle inflation.
We call that forced scarcity. When you keep moving,
I love that
keep
term
moving the bar a little higher on yourself.
And just like you, I remember in your forced scarcity podcast, you talk about diverting all the savings away before it ever hits your checking account. Absolutely. And if you just automate that and increase it each year, you can be at 20% in a matter of years. And you never feel it. And you can be a pretty aggressive saver, but you don't feel like you're sacrificing because you've never lived on that extra money.
Right.
And that's how we did it. And it worked very well.
But I'm not hearing you say you have regret about how much you saved in the beginning. So that's good. You also, I want to mention, because you had a term that I loved, and I might have to benchmark it. Time affluence.
Yep. I'm actually writing that post right now. I was working on it yesterday. Time affluence to me, this was, I think, the finding number 2. The real value of retirement, you think about the financial side to get there, but the financial side isn't the goal. Right? The goal is that freedom. And the best way that I could think of a concise term to describe that is time affluence. And, affluence is having an abundance, right? Having an abundance of time that you can do anything you want with that's totally under your control. First time in your life, right? Since maybe you were 4 years old before you started school.
It's true.
From you're 5 years old, you're in kindergarten all the way through to when you retire. Somebody else is dictating the majority of your day.
That's right.
And suddenly now in retirement, you have now. There's a pro and a con to that because you're now responsible for 24 hours of your day, and you've got to do some planning to make sure that you're doing something in those hours that adds purpose and gives you meaning. But the time affluence factor of retirement is the best benefit that we've
Do
seen.
you find, and you're probably realizing I'm going way off script on everything,
That's
but
okay.
I just because I have
I'll
questions
call
that pop up. That's me.
Brian's going off on a
No,
tangent.
I do it in
Who
client
would've
meetings.
thought?
I do it all the time. But I'm sitting here thinking is that when we talk about time affluence, there's this pressure because you're an achiever, you're a doer. Do you feel is that because I know you have stacked a lot of things in this first 100 days of your retirement? Is that personality of being an achiever reflected, or do you think there will be a time where you just sit back, or is that just part of being a time affluence? You feel like you have to use it very efficiently and effectively.
Part of time affluence is having the luxury of taking it easy.
Yeah.
And you see all the, train trips and this, that, and the other, but there's a lot of downtime, introspection, thinking about the reality that, hey, we're really retired now. And that's not as sexy. That doesn't get, all the, Twitter following the thing, but that's a reality. You've got a lot more relaxed downtime, introspection, and I would say that's a valuable part of our day now. Even this early in retirement, there is a lot of downtime that's rewarding.
You make retirement sound really
I'm about to say,
I ain't gonna lie. I follow your journals and I'm like, that's only 10 years away from me. But don't worry, guys. I'm not going anywhere. I'm loving what I'm doing.
2028.
Fritz is not officially retired either, I don't think, because I think this whole thing is turning into a side hustle. We'll get into that a little bit too. But this is what a cool way to kind of connect.
You said there were three things that you expect. You said the first was the freedom was worth the cost. The second was this time affluence. You have the time that you're planning. But there was a third thing, right?
Yeah.
There was a third one you said.
Yeah, and the third one really is, and a friend of mine had told me this, and I didn't really know if I'd believe it, but it's been true with us. Shockingly to me, we really don't think about money.
That's great.
It's
that
weird.
Means you're doing it right.
I want to say that again because I think that's so. So here is an individual who spent his entire working career building up assets, getting his army of dollar bills to go to work for him. And now, at the point in his life when he has to depend on those assets more than ever before, he doesn't think about money. I mean, if that's not like the banner for planning, that sounds incredible.
Yeah. Well, and I think others experience the same thing from friends I've talked to that have been through it as well. And I think where it comes down, this will get into your volatility question a little bit as well, but I think you kind of replicate your paycheck and you set up your ACH transfers from your savings, blah, blah, blah. But you kind of just know that natural flow of money is coming in, and the money that's coming in is sufficient, if you've done your planning right, is sufficient to cover your needs and some wants, right? So once that happens, you just know, hey, the money's going to be there, and as long as I just spend what's in my checking account, well, that's fine.
Great.
And
I love it.
and you don't really have to think about it. It really is on autopilot.
So, I think you just said something really interesting. And Brian, I've heard you say this 1,000 times before. When we talk about young folks starting out, we talk about how it's important to have a budget. What do you have coming in? What do you have going out? But you've been very forthcoming that, in your household, you and your wife don't budget a ton anymore because it's kind of like a golf swing. Once you have it down, you just kind of know how it works. Well, it sounds like in retirement, that same mentality takes hold.
Yeah.
It's not like, hey, I have this big pot of money and I can just spend freely. You still operate inside the confines of that budget that you have set up for retirement, right?
That's right. But you really, and your budget is on a macro level.
Yeah.
You kind of know your annual spend. You look at a safe withdrawal rate. We were very conservative on that. And once you know that, then you just say, okay, I don't really have to budget. It's very similar to the forced, scarcity, because you can spend what's in your checking account.
Yeah.
And that's you don't have to budget because if it's there, you can spend it.
I love it.
That's powerful stuff. It really is. I want to transition and talk about, because those are the three things you kind of expected.
Yeah.
What's the three things in your first 60 days that kind of caught you off guard that you were surprised by?
Yep. The first one, and I guess I was just naive to not really think about it, but man, it's wonderful to be able to do things Monday through Friday, right? The supermarket's not crowded. I like to trout fish. There's a really nice fly fishing river where I live in the mountains, not too far from here. And, it's crowded on the weekends, right? Everybody's coming over to the mountains. Man, you go on Monday, the river's empty. You know, you got your choice of fishing holes and there's nobody else there. You know, you go to the lake to go swimming, there's nobody there. You go camping. You know, we've been going to these state parks and we do a lot of camping. We're camping now Monday to Friday because there's no crowds.
Trying to stay away from the people.
Yeah, and we're not, you know, antisocial or anything, but it's just nice to be in a relaxed pace without a lot of people. So that was one of our surprises. How I call it going against the flow of the world. Right.
Yeah.
The majority of the world works Monday to Friday and they go out and do things on the weekend. Well, we're kind of doing our stuff Monday through Friday and we kind of hunker down on the weekends and avoid the crowds. And it's a wonderful thing. I didn't expect that.
Well, and here's a side benefit I thought about when we were putting this all together. What happens when you're doing stuff that nobody else is doing is it's cheaper.
Yeah.
I mean, when you
true.
fly, when you travel, if you are going against the stream, it's that whole contrarian mentality.
Demand,
it's the supply and demand issue. You're saving money as well as, and you turn. And I love this statement as well. You said it makes good things great or better. You know, it really does make these things more enjoyable, and I love that part of it.
Yeah. The second thing was, these were things I didn't expect. The second one, you know, I mentioned the 2% fear factor. There was some anxiety. How's this transition going to go? And I still pinch myself. I mean, maybe I'll wake up and, you know, it'll be different at some point. But up until now, it's been surprisingly easy to make the transition for us. And I kind of expected. I've seen some people kind of have a rough adjustment, you know, and it's such a huge adjustment in life. But in our case, it's been surprisingly easy. So I would say that was probably our second surprise.
And I want to make sure, because I thought these were key things. I'm just going to go through them real quick, and you feel free to add some editorialize on them, because this is your 5 keys to a great retirement transition. This was a very intentional approach on your part. You said number 1 was a strong focus on achieving balance in your life before retirement. So, I mean, you essentially, and I know we talked about it, but did you do a retirement test drive?
I did. I wrote an article about that as well. And this was probably 18 months before our retirement. And we took, I think, 2 weeks. Maybe it's 10 days. I think it was over like Thanksgiving, but we didn't go visit family. We just said, look, let's just stay home at our cabin in the mountains, which we had bought in preparation for retirement, and let's just pretend we're retired.
Right.
And let's just live as if we're retired. You know, I'm going to stay off my computer, stay off work emails. It's a quieter time with the holidays and whatnot. And we tried to mentally put ourselves into the retirement as close as you can.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And that helps because you think about things. It's you talked earlier, is there downtime in our schedule? Well, when you do a forced mini test retirement, it's forced downtime to think about what you want your retirement to be, and it was very, very valuable for us. And I'm sure that's part of what made the transition easier.
I think another thing that, and I don't know if you did this on purpose, but I think another thing that I love is you said that immediately prior to retirement, you were saving, you know, as much as maybe 40% of your income.
Yeah.
And I love that from the savings perspective, but this is where I love it from even a different perspective. We get people who ask us all the time, or we'll ask them, hey, how much money do you spend? And it's amazing how often they're like, oh, I have no idea. If you want a really easy way to go see how much money you really do spend, go take last year's tax return, back out how much you saved, back out how much you paid in taxes, back out how much you gave away. There's a pretty good chance that whatever number is left over, that's what you spend.
It's a good spot check, for sure.
That's how you go figure that out. Well, if you're someone who is saving 40%, you are actually test driving retirement, living on that reduced income. So you're still paying taxes, still giving, but now you only have 60% left over. I mean, that's a great way to test and see, okay, can we really live off of that withdrawal rate that we determine? And I think that's a beautiful way to test drive it.
Well, and something else we did, which I would encourage everybody to do if you can. We downsized. We sold our house in the city. We moved up to the mountains, smaller place. We took the equity in the home and we paid off the cabin. So we were debt free about a year or two before our retirement. And I think if you can do that, it relieves your anxiety in retirement, obviously, but it also allows you to the point about 40%. Those last couple of years of retirement, you're debt free. You're still making the same amount of money. Just don't start spending it. Just slide that away, force scarcity, and it automatically forces up your savings in that last couple of years.
I don't think you're unusual in the fact that you go into hyper saver mode even more so. You amp it up another degree that 2 to 3 years before retirement, because a lot of people always give the analogy, and it's a visual thing, is that when you see that you're driving up on a huge hill, like you're coming down a hill and you see a huge hill, and when I say coming down, you're usually in your peak earning years right before you retire. You usually, I know when I'm driving a car, I hit the gas a little bit to accelerate before you hit that hill. And it's kind of the same way if you're looking to build momentum to hit that retirement. just as well as possible. So
Yeah.
number 2 on your list was intentionally accelerate your development of external interest in your final 3 to 5 years of work. This is brilliant.
Yeah, and really this, if you think about it like a slope, work has been 90%, not 90%, work is a big part of your life.
Yeah,
sure.
And as you get into when you get to retirement, it's 0, right?
Right.
So don't just do it as a cliff.
Yeah.
Intentionally ramp down that commitment. Not commit, you're still there, you're still doing your job, but your mental devotion to it, I guess, the time that you spend thinking about it, ramp that down so that it's more of a gradual slope and start ramping up those things that are going to be what you're going to do in retirement, which is where the test retirement kind of
Yeah,
helps
that's
because
right.
you develop some interest. My blog is an example, right? I built that as kind of, hey, maybe this is something I'll do in retirement, maybe not, right? Try different things and start growing those and building those before you get to the retirement threshold so that it's not as big of a cliff.
And that ties in 3 because you kind of just said number 3 was strive to find other areas in your life to develop and ramp these up as you approach
That's
retirement. And then number 4, this one was good too. Develop alternative means to develop the socialization and self-esteem that work brings and begin that development as part of your retirement planning.
Yep.
I mean, that's powerful because if you're an achiever, a lot of your success, they even Millionaire Next Door, y'all know I'm a huge fan of it. One of the things I thought was interesting when you read the Millionaire Next Door is it talks about how super successful people take great pride in like industry awards and other things. It's not uncommon for achievers to take a lot of pride in their in their work success. So if you know you're one of those people that you've done very well working and you've been successful and you're nervous about that, go ahead and do number 4, which is to develop those alternative social networks and other things so that you don't just jump off the cliff and go from being big man on campus essentially to now you've essentially ripped the rug out from underneath yourself.
Exactly.
You talked about a lot of the retirement fails that you've kind of read about and you sort of studied up on, and I think it's so interesting. We're so fortunate that we get to, in our day jobs, we get to help people as they prepare for retirement, make it to retirement, work through retirement. And one of the questions I always ask is someone, you talk about that person who's a very high achiever, loves their job, very driven, we see the other side too, where someone's like, man, I hate my job. I've been doing this for 40 years. I'm ready to get out and I'm going to retire at this age on this day. And one of the questions I always follow up with is, okay, we know exactly what you're retiring from. What are you retiring to?
Yeah.
And I'm amazed at how often people don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, having now gone through that, if you can't answer that question well, you're setting yourself up to have a retirement fail to some extent?
I don't know if I would say it'll lead to a fail, but I would say it'll definitely go back to what I said earlier about the more time you spend prior to retirement thinking about what you want your retirement lifestyle to be, the smoother that transition will be. You're talking the opposite side of that coin. Sure. If you don't take time to plan about it and have what are you going to, the transition will be harder.
Sure.
I don't know that it would be a fail. Financially, if you're great, but some, if you look at the percentage of people that go back to work, I wrote an article about this. The vast majority of people that go back to work in retirement aren't doing it for the money. They're doing it
because they want something to do.
Doing it for that
We've seen that.
Yeah.
We have clients that resemble that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting.
To me, that's not finding that thing.
That's right.
That gives you purpose.
That gives you purpose.
That's exactly right.
That's a powerful.
Yeah.
And this is a fun thing. Number 5, because this is something I will tell you, you don't even have to be retired to do this. I do a travel bucket list with my wife. We do it as a date night. We go out and we create lists of places we want to go. Now, I'll be honest, 75 to 80% of them don't get done in the 5-year period.
Sure.
But it's still a fun date night. It's kind of like buying that lottery ticket for $1 that you get to daydream and you get to think about. And you do 25%. But you went a step further. You said number 5, begin populating a bucket list of items you'd like to do in retirement. Broaden it to include categories beyond travel, so stretch yourself.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it sounds like you guys are doing that. You've taken up even more hobbies, the whole exercise.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
We're more involved in some charity work and some other things. So, yeah, I think, travel instantly comes to mind when you think bucket list. I read an article somewhere about somebody, and I kind of replicated it, where you have different, like you'll have a spiritual bucket, and you'll have an interpersonal bucket, and you'll have a travel bucket. Okay, fine. But try to force yourself to think about other areas that you want to develop and try to populate those as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
So a bucket list item might be learning a new instrument, even though it has nothing to do with going somewhere. And it's not even really a financial deal, but if you've always wanted to learn how to play the guitar, like Dave Grohl, Dave, if you're listening, check us out, then, you can do that in retirement because you do have the time affluence to be able to devote to something like that.
And I think, if you've been I was in a corporate type job. I think finding things like that do kind of test, I don't know, left brain, right brain, which is which, but the other side of your brain.
Yeah.
Try to find some of those. On my blogging, that to me is kind of an artistic, creative process, right? That's different than what I've been doing, and that's fulfilling.
Yeah.
So I think if you can find things like a musical instrument, a language, those types of things are I think, especially applicable for retirement bucket list items.
Number 3 on the things that kind of surprised you transitioning in that first 60 days was variety is the spice of life.
Yeah, and this was, I didn't really think about this until after we retired, but so much of your life before retirement is so predictable, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to go to work on Monday. You're going to have that meeting, that staff meeting, that call, that meeting. So much of that is so predictable. Mm-hmm. And we kind of said intentionally, look, life doesn't have to be as structured anymore.
Right.
And this kind of evolved, but I wasn't expecting it. You can pursue unpredictability, right? You don't have to set routines. You can do different things. I'm trying. Our gym has all these different classes. Okay, fine. I want to tell you some of the classes I've taken. Right? What the heck? Just try them. Be unpredictable. You don't know what
yoga.
Like.
They got go yoga. And
go yoga. What's the one
you are in the mountains, so
So go out to moneyguy.com and we'll show you a picture of Fritz doing goat yoga. Go make sure you sign up.
But I think that force yourself to enjoy variety and stay out of the routine because it's all within your control.
Sure.
You control your time affluence. Use it creatively and don't let yourself get stuck into a rut, because you don't have to. It's
that would be a
control.
struggle for me, I think.
As a planner, I
I'm
feel
a
the same
structured
way.
guy.
Yeah.
Got to work on that.
Yeah. I think what he just said is neither one of us are ready for retirement. I think that's what he's told us.
I know I'm not. So I want to talk about how we minimize volatility, the anxiety when you approach retirement. Because here's the thing I tell people because we get calls from people who are 7 years, 10 years, even people that want to, these fire movement individuals that are maybe even 15 years from, but they want to really save. I said, the thing you have to think about when you go through this transition period is that right now, if something happens in the stock market, you have this internal coping mechanism where you just say, no problem, I'll just work a few more years. All right? And you even, because didn't you add an extra year?
Yeah.
You added an extra year. What caused that?
I'll tell you, there were really two things that drove that. One was I had a wise uncle who retired young, 55, same age as me, ironically. And I was at a wedding with him.
Is that Carl?
No, a different Carl. Yeah, you did read my stuff. I'm impressed. Different uncle, but his is a good story, isn't it, Carl? Yeah. But he had told me, and this was probably 10 years ago, and I'd say, I'm thinking maybe try to retire a little bit early, very early thoughts of it. And he goes, just let me give you one piece of advice. He said, once you leave, you're going to be at your peak earning years, and your skill set, your Rolodex, the value of your contacts, depreciates really quickly. So if you're not quite sure, put in the one extra year because you'll to replace that amount of income doing side hustles or trying to go back to work as a consultant.
Could be a decade instead of 1 year.
Versus 1 year. So that was number one. Number two was a friend of mine who retired a year before me, and he was debating going back and forth, and I told him what my uncle said. Yeah. And he decided to work one more year. And after he retired, he said, Fritz, he said, that was the best advice I've ever gotten. He said, we don't have to worry about a thing because we knew we were ready a year ago.
Right.
Now we're super ready.
Well, especially if you have a year like 2017 where the financial markets did well. I mean, it really padded things up, I'm sure.
I think part of how you reduce the concern about volatility is if you're not quite sure, hey, tough it out for another year.
Measure twice, cut once.
Yeah, exactly. You can't put the board back together.
Yeah.
And that I think is one of the big things to do. I think the other thing that we've done, which is we really don't worry about volatility. I'm a big fan of the bucket strategy. Mm-hmm. You got bucket one is kind of liquid cash, and I'm conservative. Right. I think stocks are overvalued and things like that.
Do you keep now? Be careful. We don't give financial. We don't give investment advice specifically on the show. But do you? How much cash? I mean, because we talk about cash management all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get into even more numbers in a minute. But we tell people when you hit retired status, 3 to 6 months is standard for most people. Yeah. But then when you are in retirement, we tell people it could be 18 months, it could be 36 months. Yeah. Where do you fall?
We're slightly over 3 years of cash.
Okay. So you're even higher than 36 months. That's great, though.
I'm conservative.
Yeah.
I'm conservative. Yeah. And I know if a downturn comes, I won't have to sell any equities for 3 years. And now you wouldn't want to go to zero, right? But even then you look at a diversified portfolio. Again, I know you can't talk about this stuff, but with a diversified portfolio, the chances of all of it being down at once are pretty low. So even after the 3-year cash bucket is emptied, realistically, you're probably going to have something else in that 3-year period that you can siphon a little
Right.
bit off of to refill bucket 1.
1 year before retirement versus now being in retirement, because we're over 36 months, over 3 years. If I'd have gone a year before when you worked that full extra year,
Yeah.
was it still over 3 years, or was that
No.
the year you built it up?
We
Really?
built it up. We sold some stocks. Markets were pretty good. We
Yeah.
decided to take a little bit off the table. All the bonuses, things like that, any extra income I got, all went into bucket 1.
See, that's another benefit of that extra. I don't want you to work an extra year. I'm not saying, but I'm just saying there is a benefit if you're getting close to that gateway and you don't have the extra cash and you have to do Apple Cart turnover to get it. That probably shored you up in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
including the liquidity.
Yeah. And the benefit of that is when you do get into retirement and you know you can't go back to work easily to replace that income, you don't have to worry about it as much because you've got that insurance.
Sure.
So that's the biggest way I would say that we've gotten over the volatility concern.
I want to talk about some numbers, or at least some benchmarks, because look, we want to respect Fritz's privacy and the fact that you've done very well, but we're not going to give actual net worth numbers or anything like that. But I think it would be helpful. Withdrawal rate.
Yeah.
What did you use when you tried to figure out if you had enough or what's your number?
Yeah.
Did you base that off of withdrawal rate? Did you base that off of a net worth number? Or did you base that off some calculation that you had found out there on the internet? Or how did you figure out that you had enough?
Was I supposed to figure something out?
No, I just wanted to, I know you have this stuff figured out.
Yeah, no, I think, everybody says, what's your number? The number is irrelevant. What matters is cash flow, right? And what type of predictable, safe income stream can you generate from your investments? And if you haven't picked it up now, I'm pretty conservative. And, the old rule of thumb was 4% safe withdrawal rate. Now everybody's, Big Earn, I don't know if you guys follow him, but he did a 23-part series on recalculating, and he came out to about 3.25%.
Okay. I think for fire, is he a fire person?
He retired, I think he's late 40s.
Yeah, that's definitely fire.
Yeah. So, the younger you are, and 55 is young, right? The lower that safe withdrawal rate needs to be. So we really focused on, and I've tracked my net worth. Matter of fact, you talk about the giveaway. I'll give you a little tease. We tracked net worth for years, and at the bottom of my net worth, I break out all of the non-retirement funding assets, the home equity, the cars, things that you can't use to fund a retirement. And I've tracked that for the last 5 years at various safe withdrawal rates. Yeah. So I could look as each year went by, how much am I increasing my annual paycheck using different safe withdrawal rates? And it was all driven by the safest withdrawal rate we could get to get the income. So we try to keep it below, 3.25.
We talk about doing the annual net worth statement constantly.
Yeah.
Did you get that from us, or was you already doing that? Was that an attaboy?
Sorry, I was doing it before you.
And I was trying to see if that was an echo from the money guy, because
you were probably still in high school when I started doing my
come on now.
1992. That's when I started my net worth.
Got him.
Just left high school.
So here's for all of you out there listening. This is a reason that I really think if you've never joined us for our live stream. So right now we're recording this live. We got a bunch of folks in here in the chat. The beautiful part about watching the live stream is you can ask questions. I mean, and I want Jessica Torres just asked a fantastic question that ties in really well that I think is going to add a lot of value. And her question was, when you were saving, how did you...
Hi, Jessica. Keep going.
Is that your sister?
No, but I know Jessica. It cracks me up. I had no idea she'd be out there.
How did you think about, when you were saving, the different buckets you were saving from? And like now, as you're in retirement and you're obviously having to pull from these different buckets of retirement income, how did you think about accumulating the different buckets of retirement income?
That is a good question.
It's a great question.
So Jessica, basically, and I wrote a post about this. If you look up I think it's how to create a retirement paycheck. Just Google that on my site and you'll find it. But basically, I've designated on our net worth statement, we've got the various holdings that we have, and I tied each one of those into the respective bucket. Mm-hmm. So I could look at any given point in time, and I knew, bucket 1 I was aiming for 3 years, bucket 2 I was aiming for the next 5 years, and then bucket 3 was anything longer than 8 years. So basically, bucket 2 is primarily bonds, safer.
So these are segregated by risk, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So what I could do is, as I got closer to retirement, and as I updated I only do my net worth once a year. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to look at it more frequently.
Ditto.
Than that, to be honest.
We're in the same.
Yeah. So every
boat.
year I'd update it, and I would look at, okay, where are my buckets? And depending on where I was at, primarily bucket 1, obviously, and bucket 2, because those are the ones that have targets. Bucket 3 is everything else. If I was finding myself, let's say bucket 2, and I was aiming for 5 years, and I only had 2 years, I better look at my asset allocation, maybe either sell some equities, move it into bonds, or maybe just take next year's contributions and shift it towards bonds. And I kind of did that over probably a 2 or 3 year period to kind of adjust the buckets to where I was targeting. And then bucket 1, I hit really hard the last year.
We're totally throwing you off the cuff here, but one of the things we talk about all the time on the show is tax location. Because we have your taxable accounts, you have your tax deferred, and you have your tax free, which are Roth assets.
Absolutely.
It's very easy for somebody who's approaching retirement to get a ton of tax deferred because you get the company match from your employer. Plus, you've probably been, because we only recently had in the last decade or so had Roth, qualified plans, but so you probably had a lot more tax deferred. Did you think about tax location or that when you were doing this?
I would say that wasn't the 101 level. That was as I got more into this. I've been writing for 3 years, and I've been a 30-year personal finance hobbyist, I call myself. That didn't really. I might have heard it on your show.
We really are, bro. We're kindred
Personal
spirits.
finance hobbyist. I like that.
Not a mutant, but a hobbyist.
But I'll tell you something. 2 things I would encourage people, and I'm not giving advice, et cetera, et cetera. But with the new tax law right now, and especially if you're married, single people didn't get the break. But if you're married, the marginal tax rates they've pushed them out so far. We're actually going to look at doing some before tax rollovers now that my income's dropped in retirement. The marginal tax brackets are so far out and still at 25%.
You're talking about doing a conversion?
Doing
Roth conversion strategies.
I'm going to do some Roth conversions now so that I reduce my RMD risk later.
Right.
So 2 things. One is that, look at right after you retire, start doing some conversions before you have to, especially in the current tax law environment. Talk to your CPA before making any decisions. Number 2 is in my final couple of years of work, because I was out of kilter, right? My first 20 years of work was all before tax. All the company matches before tax. Yeah. So even though it might not have made the most sense from a marginal tax perspective, I was slamming the Roth the last couple of years just to get that diversification before I retired.
Yep.
Everything I was saving, we talk about the 40% until you max out. But then I was doing the mega backdoor conversions, right? I was doing every trick I could come up with. Doing the after-tax contributions to 401k.
We don't call them backdoor conversions here. We call them making traditional IRA contributions and then separately converting those traditional IRA contributions into quit. I see you glaring at me. Come on.
You know what I'm talking about, though. So, yes.
And then mega. I like the mega because you're using the after tax. But
so definitely tax diversification is a big factor. And that continues after retirement, obviously, because you can minimize your RMD exposure up until you're 70 and a half. Right?
By the way,
start adjusting it now.
We don't pitch what we do in our day job a ton, but if you want to know what we do for a lot of our fire clients is exactly what you're talking about with those Roth conversion strategies.
Right.
So when you retire, say 50 to 70 years old, because at 70 and a half, the government makes you start pulling those qualified accounts, not necessarily your Roth accounts, but definitely all of your 401ks, 403bs, rollover IRAs. They're going to start making you take them over your life expectancy. Right. So from anybody who retires before them, we try to figure out how we can do a strategy to max out those lower tax rates. Yeah. So I feel like I have to put that out there because a lot of you fire people are do-it-yourselfers, but even Fritz is like, talk to your accountant or your financial advisor.
Yeah, of course.
And you can figure those things out.
I know a couple of good ones, by the way. If you
You said something beautiful, and I just think this is a point worth driving home. Financial planning is incredibly important up to retirement, but it doesn't stop.
Yeah.
There's a lot of planning that even takes place post-retirement and strategy you can implement. So it's an ongoing process is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. But it changes from growing the nest egg to managing the withdrawal.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
It's a totally different strategy. I wrote a whole post about our retirement withdrawal strategy, and you need to spend some time either with a good, financial planner or, this is dangerous stuff. You got to get it right.
Yeah.
Yep.
But, everybody focuses on the accumulation. The withdrawal piece is equally important, and people don't tend to talk about it as much. And that's a big part of retirement planning.
That's exactly right.
Is because one of the things I want to make sure we covered, because you even alluded to it. I don't know, because nobody knows. None of us have the crystal ball to know when the next downturn's coming. But it is. You wrote
November
a post.
17th.
You're selling a newsletter too, right? That's what when people can give you a date, they usually have a pitch for a newsletter right afterwards. But what safeguards? Is it just that bucket system that you mentioned. What safeguards do you have for the next downturn that could happen?
Number one is primarily the
Or
bucket
when it
system.
will happen, I should say.
I think number one is, the bucket system, obviously, and it will happen, right?
Yeah.
We know it'll happen.
Yeah,
Just
sure.
don't know when, how long, and how severe, unfortunately. But that's number one. I think number two is, as we looked at our living expenses and calculated the safe withdrawal rate, as I mentioned briefly earlier, that had wants and needs.
Yeah.
We could easily cut down our spending, and I think most people rationally would do that, right? If you see your portfolio taking a real hit, you would stop doing some of the wants, right? You'd focus on the needs. And I think we've built enough cushion in our living expenses that we could reduce that if we had to, if we were getting nervous the bucket one was
So
getting
you
depleted
based
and things
most of these decisions, your insurance, were really off of the cash flow side of your expenditures.
Absolutely.
That's how you
Yeah.
backed into knowing you had enough, which is unique because you do see people, and it's important to have the balance sheet too. I know you said that you never base it off of the size of your net worth, but it's very cool that you did it off cash flow because
Yeah.
that is, at the end of the day, that is what you're living off
right.
of,
Yeah. and
and the balance sheet and the assets you have to support that. It's all married and
Absolutely.
cumulative. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. I want to talk about some fun stuff.
Okay.
Hold on.
This isn't fun.
You mean withdrawal rates and Roth conversion strategies in order to buy down
You see the ebb and
RMDs?
flow.
Wasn't
We
fun?
went through the good feel of the transition, then we got into some nerdy stuff. We're trying to make this good for everybody. I saw, now, it looked like because of the view that they had on the website that you posted, you have a pull-behind trailer, a camper.
Correct.
And I'm assuming that was like one of their setup stage views because of the mountain. Was that your
No,
picture?
that was my picture. Yeah, that was
In the
that
mountains
was in
like
Tennessee.
that?
That wasn't too far from here.
So
yeah.
that's your
Yeah.
actual setup
Yeah.
with the TV,
That was my
the
truck.
couch. With,
Yeah,
it looks
yeah.
like those were reclining
Yeah,
chairs.
Yeah.
You heard that right, ladies and gentlemen. Fritz's setup is good enough to be on the brochure. That's what Brian just described.
Well, I thought it was
for
a
you.
brochure picture. I'm not gonna lie, but here's the thing: I'm not a camper.
Yeah.
Look, that sounds miserable to me. It just it
When
does
I
not
think
sound.
about rugged wilderness man, Brian Preston is what comes to
But
mind.
here's the thing: after seeing Fritz's pull behind, I could do that. That's clamping.
It's a comfortable.
Isn't that what they call it?
Yeah,
glamping?
Yeah, glamping. Yeah, glamorous camping. And I think this goes back to that mini retirement and thinking about what you want to do. And I think one of the things that we agreed we wanted to do was be able to do some slow travel. We've camped. Both my wife and I camped when we were kids, and we kind of have this theory that if you camp as kids, you probably didn't camp as a kid.
No, I have the actual opposite story. I was a wee below. Transitioning from Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts, we went on a camping trip. The tent that you know this because I've told you the story a gazillion times. The tent I slept in with like 4 other people. These were old donated Korean War tents, and we were in the Appalachian Mountains. It snowed. A huge snowstorm hit, and there was a hole above me in the tent, and
See, that's why you don't
my
camp.
my parents did not prepare me for this trip. I go up there with this cloth, sleeping bag that I probably had been using for sleepovers and everything else. It got soaking wet. I really thought I had frostbite on my legs, my feet, and it just, I've been traumatized ever since. I am, not only am I precious about closing the trunk lid of my Tesla, I'm precious about not wanting to be cold and wet outside in the Appalachian Mountains.
Okay, so I'll modify my theory. You've either never camped, or the one time you camped in Weeblos, it was a miserable experience. That's my new theory. Okay,
Ruined it forever.
But regardless, I think the point being, identify those things you want to do and plan to put the places in, the pieces in place.
Sure.
And ideally do that while you're still working, so that when you hit retirement, you've kind of got your toys, right? And that was one of the things
I brought up the toys not just to brag on you, but I want to talk about, because it is, how do you transition? How do you flip that switch? We teased on this in the intro, on the fact that you save. It's this mentality of being a builder, an empire builder, and then you get to retirement, and now all of a sudden you're supposed to go buy campers, you're supposed to go buy mountain bikes, you're supposed to go travel a bunch. That's got to play crazy mind tricks on you. So how did you, is there a process? Is there a system? How did you do it? How did you transition?
That's a good question. And I'll quote, kind of butcher a Dave Ramsey quote, but I wrote a post about it. It hit me. And
he's a neighbor of ours around here,
that's
so
right.
that's fine. You
Hey,
can love on Dave.
Yeah, that's him right over there.
That's right.
Is he waiting for you?
Live studio
I
audience.
wish Dave was hanging out in the studio audience. It would help us.
But one of the things I thought about, my wife and I, as we prepared for retirement, you spend 30 years working to get there, right? Mm-hmm. And if you think about the Dave Ramsey quote, live like no one else, so later you can live like no one else.
That's right, yeah.
most people tend to focus on the first half of that sentence.
Yeah.
Right? Live like no one else. Save, save, save.
Yeah.
Don't forget the second half of the sentence, right?
The
Why
fun part
why
of the
are you
sentence.
doing this?
Yeah.
You're doing this so that when you retire or later in life, you can live like no one else. And that kind of triggered in me, we're not going to have to worry about money. We know we're in decent shape. We've got a safe withdrawal rate. We've saved for 33 years. We don't have to worry about that anymore. And we were intentional, and we kind of made a conscious decision, because your natural tendency, and most people, if you read the stats, most people underspend in retirement, and their portfolios they continue to grow, and people are underspending what they could. Now, you got to be careful. You can't go crazy.
It's true.
Right? You got to have a plan. But I think going into retirement, knowing that saving is, you've done the heavy lifting, it's time to live like no one else.
Yeah.
And we made that conscious decision to kind of let ourselves have some fun. We knew we had enough in there. We knew we were good. We had our targeted starting points, right? Bucket 1, bucket 2, bucket 3. And anything that we could kind of afford to divert to toys and still hit that starting point. Don't forget, we sold the big house.
Yeah.
We had some equity, so we could use some of that. We were able to use that to kind of position ourselves to not have to worry about it as much in retirement. And I think that's kind of how we went about it.
So even though you said you didn't have like a number, like, of assets, since you are backing into that number, I'm reverse engineering your system essentially. Since you knew the number you wanted to be able to have to live off of from a cash flow perspective, and then you knew the withdrawal rate that you were going to go with, you kind of knew what part of your assets you needed to cord off and keep that protected. That's your principle that, hey, this is I'm retired, I have enough, but and not that you spent everything that was above and beyond that, but that probably gave you the freedom to feel like, hey, I could go, because I'm sure there's some upgrades on that pull behind. Based upon what I saw, it looked like it had a few. Because I mean, did it have a kitchen island?
Yeah.
I mean, it has a kitchen island. I mean, this thing. The picture doesn't even show the bedroom. I could see there was a step up, and I'm like, it's almost like one of those Looney Tune things where they threw out a cube and you go inside. It's teeny tiny on the outside, and then you go inside, and it looked a lot bigger on the inside than I was expecting.
Hey, Bo, he's thinking about camping.
I'm about to say, I can hear that. The wheels are turning. The wheels are turning.
No, to your point, though, I think one of the things we did, we kind of, it's just numbers, right? It's just math. You can look at a withdrawal rate. You can look at net worth. It's all the same number. It's just a matter of which way you interpret it. But one of the things we did probably 2 or 3 years out, we kind of knew, okay, here's where we want to be. And so I kind of called that our starting position. So here's our starting target. And I kind of built a little bit of a cash flow model where between now, this was 2 years prior to retirement, and retirement day one, here's the things I think are going to happen that are going to bring cash in, and here's the things we'd like to do that are going to take cash out. And we were able to kind of, okay, here's the fifth wheel. We had a line item for it, and we knew, okay, the bonus is going to come in, et cetera. Different things like that. We're going to sell the house, how much net worth or how much net equity we're going to have, how much do we need to pay off the other cabin, how do we look in our buckets, and we could kind of target a starting cash position and get there by looking at inflows and outflows between now and retirement. That's how we did it.
Sure.
I know you said you're not an engineer, but you are wired. You are wired a lot like us.
Okay.
It's pretty.
You called
awesome.
me a nerd earlier, so I guess,
All right, let me ask one other question. I think this is great. And again, this is directly from our live audience right now. But you said you kind of thought through everything. Well, one of the questions, and this actually comes from T-Boy, but one of the questions a lot of folks have when it comes to retirement, and the biggest unknown that most people are uncomfortable with is healthcare.
Yeah.
And how do you account for it? How do you plan for that?
That is great.
And truthfully, I was going to save this for T-Boy. I'm not saying you're getting a tumbler, but you may get a tumbler for this.
yeah, that's a good question.
Okay, well, Brian's saying you're getting a tumbler for this. That's a great question. We were going to save this for the Q&A, but I think this is so important that I want us to answer it now so that all our folks out in podcast
T-Boy needs
world-
to stay around to the end, though, so we can give the instructions on how to get
That's
it
right.
somewhere.
Yeah,
But
that's
go ahead, though.
So how did you think about that? How did you plan for unknown healthcare in retirement?
That is the big question mark. And ironically, I've got a post coming out tomorrow, so if you're listening now, sign up on my blog.
Man, you are good at this
What is
promotion
this?
thing. I think we have promoted 3 or 4 posts here.
But this one is health insurance and retirement unsolved.
Okay.
And basically, we haven't solved it.
Sure.
And yet I still retired.
This makes me, because we
crazy.
have this question comes up all the time, and we give it, but keep going.
Okay.
Because this,
So what we did, number one, we made an aggressive assumption, conservative assumption on how much it was going to cost us. We knew we were going to have to go private pay. I do have a pension, so we weren't going to be able to qualify for any of the subsidies.
Sure.
So we looked at an all-in private health insurance, and we said, okay, let's use $25,000 a year. Just kind of grabbed a number.
Okay.
So $2,000 a month, and let's inflate it faster than the general pace of inflation. I did a cash flow out to age 95, and one of the line items, healthcare insurance.
Sure.
So we used $25,000 a year, and I inflated it 5% a year. So we kind of built that into our safe withdrawal rate number and said, okay, let's assume we need to spend that. So that's number one. You've got to account for it in your cash flow because you are going to have to pay for it, and it's not cheap.
That's right.
Number two is I went with Cobra, unfortunately, but you know it's
18
what
months.
you got. 18
Yeah,
months
that's what you
costs us $1,000 a month. So guess what? I'm $1,500 per month to the good, right?
Sure.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's okay. And then so that gets me through December of 19.
Okay.
And then one more year at the end of that, my employer used to have a retiree medical plan that they've discontinued, but they're phasing it out. So I catch the last year of that.
Okay.
So I've got the first 30 months of retirement covered.
Yeah.
And then I'm hoping that
Washington gets their act
Washington
together.
gets their act
Sure,
together,
yeah.
which is 30 months is probably not enough. But, you know, markets are efficient, and we're looking at health sharing. We're looking
Yeah.
at, you know, we're continuing to evaluate it.
Sure.
And we're just hoping with a 30-month window here that that's going to be sufficient. That's how we handle it.
So I'm going to paraphrase what you said. You picked a conservative number. You think it's probably going to be less than $2,000 a month. Most likely, is that probably what you
I'm concerned it
He's
might not be
basing
enough.
off probably some of the research we've seen of all
Yeah.
the hundreds of thousands of dollars
Sure.
it costs you in retirement. Fortunately, a lot of that's back end loaded, but I think it's still smart to plan for it.
Yeah.
And then I love that you inflated it. It's not like you just thought, okay, well, it's going to be $2,000 a month indefinitely. You actually grew it out.
Right.
You
And-
did 2,500 actually,
Yeah,
right?
2,500.
Yeah.
Well, 25,000 a year. So what is that? That's about
$2,000 a month.
$2,000 a month.
Sorry, Bo.
It's like math is my
It's
thing
like you
or
do
something.
math.
I don't know.
It's actually
So I think that's great.
$2,172.
So I hope what you heard in that is we don't know.
Right.
And anytime we don't know, you kind of have to make a best guess hypothesis and you go with that. And the beautiful part about financial plans is if you build in enough conservatism,
Yep.
you leave yourself room to adjust as circumstances change.
It didn't derail you. And I will tell you, I'm always an optimist in the fact that I know we have so much bickering going on in Washington, but this is still an ongoing concern that everybody knows a concern. And I think that I have confidence that we'll have something. It might not be perfect. Nothing coming out of Washington's ever perfect, but at least it will be something functional for you in retirement.
I think and I hope that there's a solution to it. You know, one of the things I write in my post that's coming out tomorrow, there's plug 4, is but you know, I've got friends of mine who say, "Oh, I'm not going to retire. I don't have any health insurance. I'm concerned about health insurance." And to me, that in and of itself, you got to look at your personal situation. But if you've got the financial resources to cover it, at the end of the day, it's a number.
That's the
right?
part that can break you, though,
Now,
if you're not-
pre-existing
you have to be
conditions,
very
things like that.
careful.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But just recognize at the end of the day, it's kind of a number, and build it into your conservative assumptions. And you know, is it reason to keep working for some people? Maybe.
Sure.
In our case, it wasn't.
Yeah, makes sense. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. And T-Boy, great, fantastic question.
Give me
Stay
one.
around to the end so we can get you a tumbler, give you the instructions. I want to go ahead and transition to kind of close the show out on these 10 commandments of retirement that you compiled. And remember, guys, if you have not given us your email address, because our new plan going forward, Fritz, just to catch you up, every new show we do, we're going to create some type of deliverable. And all we need is for people to give us their email address to get on our subscriber list. And at the end of the show, probably the following Monday, we release new shows on Friday. Now, you live streamers will have to wait approximately a week. But the following Monday, we're hoping to automatically send out a deliverable for every show. So that way, if you think I ramble on and go on tangents, at least you'll get some type of deliverable that's much more concise. I'm basing that off some of the troll comments I get. I'm like, where have y'all been? I've been doing this since 2006 where we bump around walls like we do. But definitely, this is going to be one of the deliverables we want to share with our listeners. And Fritz, you're welcome to it's your content, so we want you to feel like you can use it as well.
Thanks.
And I want to just reiterate what you said. The only way to get it is you have to go out to moneyguy.com, subscribe, give us your email address. We're not going to put it on the website. We want this to be something special that you have access to as a member of the Money Guy family. So go out, subscribe, and you're going to get some awesome content moving forward.
As I get into, I want to go through these and let you put to editorial, creator content, information on. What was the inspiration of the 10 Commandments, though?
Yeah, this was, I wrote this maybe 2 or 3 months before retirement, and it was really, I'm into the bottom of the 9th inning. I'm really getting close, bases are loaded. And I just wanted to take a minute to kind of think about, okay, what are the most important things for me as I'm getting into retirement? What do I want to make sure I keep as my guiding principles in retirement? And then maybe I'll look back a couple of years later, or, I'll get off track and this will be my thing to go back and look at.
Yeah.
But I thought it'd be interesting to kind of say, okay, going into this, I'm not there yet. what's important to me and what do I want my retirement to be, and that's really what dictated. That's what led to.
So was it to shake the nerves out a little bit, and then to kind of get some stuff down paper on it?
The creative process is hard to explain.
Yeah.
Sometimes I probably, when I sat down to write this, I didn't even know what I was going to write about. I just started typing, and it just kind of.
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't it beautiful when that happens?
I love being in the flow.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Now that we're 100 days out of your you've crossed the point.
Yeah.
Tell us if anything is evolved or changed as we're going through this.
Okay,
So
I'm a sinner. I've broken at least one of the commandments.
Well, I want you to share that because we can amend this.
It's number 4, by the way.
Unlike what Moses wrote down, we can actually amend this thing.
Okay.
So number 1 was have an attitude of gratitude.
Yep. That was really, there's a lot of things we can't control, but one of the things we can is our attitude. Mm-hmm. And, I look at people that just have a positive spin on life, and then we all know those that have a negative spin on life.
Sure.
And I've always tried to be a positive person. And hey, I'm retiring at age 55. Be thankful for what what I've achieved, and have a positive attitude about it, regardless of what happens.
Sure.
Right? You can shape how you view things. So that was really number 1. Was hey, be thankful and have an attitude of gratitude.
So that internal voice that we all have. Bo, you and I were having a conversation. You said, "Hey, I've been in the shower. I'm always talking to myself and think." That internal voice, you're saying, is always glass half full. You've kind of gone an optimistic look.
I try to. We're all human, right? We're all human, but I think where you can influence, or if you start getting negative thoughts, kind of be aware of it and try to shift it back. I try to be positive.
And then you had a derivative, 1A. Instead of giving it 11, because 10 sounds much, you did a 1A, which was give with a generous heart.
Yeah, and this goes back to the attitude of gratitude. Hey, I'm very fortunate, been blessed. Don't be stingy with it, right?
Yeah.
Be generous. Help people where you can, and it's kind of the same with my work on my blog. It's just give, right? I mean, it's just you're trying to help people.
We call it the abundance cycle.
I knew you were going to say. I was like, come on, bring the abundance cycle.
We go to conferences and people go, "You just give that away," and I'm like, "Look, I have yet to be let down. The more we give, the more it seems we get back."
Right.
So I love that you have that same generous heart. So number 2. Pursue passions.
Yeah, and this kind of goes to the thing I said earlier about trying different things. Don't get stuck in a routine. Pursue different things, right? You don't know I never knew blogging would become a passion of mine, right? I just started messing around with the blog, and 3 years later, it's gotten kind of big, and I love it, right? But I wouldn't have known if I wouldn't have pursued that.
Yeah.
So pursue different things, and you just don't know what you're going to find. You got to have passions in retirement.
I love it, and that's what. We're not going to give numbers or anything, but it's started to pay a few dividends. I predict that this thing's going to do even better than you anticipate. That's what I love about abundance, is you give and it really does come back around. It's an incredible thing. So number 3 was keep the balance. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, and this one came from way back early in my career. I mean, I was 24 years old, new in sales. My boss sent me to a Dale Carnegie course, right? It's really good stuff, right? And there was a guy in the class. This is a horrible story, actually, but on like the 3rd week of the class, we all come in and Bob wasn't there. We're like, "What's up with Bob?" And the instructor said, "Hey, I hate to tell you guys, but Bob committed suicide last night." Yeah. And this has hit me, 30 years later.
And nobody wants to hear that.
And we didn't know Bob that well. We were in a class a couple weeks, But the instructor said, "Let me just say one thing about Bob." He said, "Life is like a wheel, and you got spokes, all your different spokes. You got your religion, you got your financial, you got your family, you've got your work, blah, blah, blah. And your spokes kind of all need to be about the same length, or else your wheel doesn't roll very well." And Bob had some spokes that were really out of whack.
Yeah.
And
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. So that's what that one's about. Keep the balance. It's keep your spokes kind of the same length.
So, and I love that you even throw stuff out there. This isn't just financial, right? It's passion. It's physical. It's staying active. It's keeping your body and your mind. Yeah. That's a great. We gotta.
There's a visual there. We
gotta use that. My wheels are turned to balance.
Let me real quick. Quick diversion, but I'll keep it short, so I'm not accused of being.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, this is me, people, not Brian. Don't throw the dart at him. One of the things I've noticed as I've gotten into retirement, my writing now, it's much more about non-financial things.
Yeah,
right? It is about these lifestyle things because they are important.
I think that's awesome. I think that's great.
Number 4, make no obligations.
And this is the one I broke.
You said you broke?
Yeah. My point here, I've seen so many of my friends who they retire, the phone rings, they said, your phone will ring off the hook, right? I was in a pretty specialized area in a industry that values the skill, I guess. And your phone will ring off the hook, consulting opportunities, et cetera. And I did not want to, jump on those. I'm like, no, I want to take a year and just not do anything, right? So this is about probably 2 weeks after I wrote this article, my phone rings, and it's a guy who I've got a lot of respect for in the industry. And, I just always call him to wish me congratulations on retirement. I'm like, oh, thanks, nice talking to you. He goes, actually, I had a reason for calling. I was like, oh, great, he's going to
Here it comes.
Here it comes. But he did, but it's not at all what I expected. They had an opening on their board of directors. And I was sitting there going, again, once you get to the retirement, the financial things aren't what you make your decision based on. So it wasn't about, hey, I can make some extra money. No, it doesn't hurt. But to me, the decision wasn't driven by, I didn't even know if there was compensation.
Sure.
Obviously, I knew there'd be some, but it wasn't a not-for-profit. I mean, it was a corporation. But to me, having the opportunity to kind of step back at 40,000 feet and just kind of talk strategically about where this company was going, that intrigued me, right? Yeah. And it's not a big obligation. It's a minor sin.
They probably have meetings in great locations.
It's not bad, yeah. So, I think I would say the way I would revise this, instead of make no obligations, I would probably revise it to be make very selective obligations. Don't get yourself so committed that you're suddenly slammed with all these obligations, because you don't have to. You're free.
You don't have, it goes
commit
back
to what you want to commit to.
Freedom,
Right.
plus freedom.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to have freedom and control your life.
Yeah.
Number 5, try new things.
Yeah, and what this referred to, my wife and I, about a year before retirement, we set up a cookie jar in our bedroom, and we have a little Post-it thing by it. And each one of us, every week, we're trying to write down new ideas and throw them in the jar. Neither one of us know what the other one's putting in there.
Just like things to do in retirement?
Yeah,
That's
just
what
random things like, okay, let's go kayak on this river. Let's go, whatever. And they can be big or small, no rules.
Think about it, I should pitch my wife on that. You know how big our cookie jar would be by the time we got to retirement?
Well, so that was the whole goal, was to try to challenge us to do different things. And we said, okay, once we retire, we'll pull something out every week, and that'll give us something. Of course, now we're 100 days in. We've pulled one thing out.
That's what I was saying. Y'all have been so busy,
we've
though.
been running. It's been fun. But I think it's good to stretch your mind and try to think of new things that you can try in retirement. That's what it was about.
Number 6 was take care of your body.
Yeah, and as we get older, let's not kid ourselves. You talk about the healthcare concerns. Was it Tebow?
T-Boy.
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 Tebow, if you're out
there watching, we want you to.
You're a Gator, but we'd love for you to be a client as well.
Yeah, but there's only things you can control, and one of the things you can control is taking care of yourself. And hey, you've got time affluence now. Yeah. Dedicate some of it to taking care of your body, because it gets more and more important as you get older. So we made that a priority.
Were you working out before you retired?
Yeah, I was. I've been a runner for 25 years, but it was always kind of a lunchtime run. Now it's like, no, let's do that. I hardly run at all anymore. I maybe run once every 2 weeks. Now
but you're swimming lakes.
Yeah, I'm swimming lakes. I'm
mountain biking.
I'm doing, what was your dance yoga thing you said I was doing?
Goat yoga. Goat yoga.
You don't dance with it, goats.
Goat yoga.
You do yoga with it.
Goat dancing is a more advanced exercise technique.
Number 7 was stay flexible to change.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned earlier, change is hard. Change is hard. And I think, kind of like attitude, you can choose to look at change as an opportunity, or you can look at it as an obstacle or resist it. Who knows what retirement's going to bring? Mm-hmm. Be open to it. Go with the flow, and just accept the change and kind of be adaptable. Again, these were things I was trying to tell myself that I wanted to be in retirement.
And then you've been doing this one. Number 8 was cherish friends and family.
Yeah, and I took a week early in my retirement. One of our fifth wheel trips was up to Michigan to see my dad and spend time up there. And I think now that we've got the time, it reminds me of that song, the old song about the cats in the cradle, right? Oh, yeah. Hey,
is
you
that
cat
Cat
time.
Stevens?
Yeah, and that. You have no excuse now to not.
You're too young.
Yeah, you would. It's basically the kid. The dad doesn't pay attention to the kid.
Okay.
The kid grows up and he doesn't pay attention to the dad.
Ugly Kid Joe remade it too in the 90s. I mean, that's how nerdy I am. I love music.
Ugly Kid Joe?
I think that was
I don't know them either. Anyway, the point being, now you've got the time affluence.
Sure.
Make sure you prioritize time with friends and family.
I think that's great.
Number 9, have fun.
Yeah, short and sweet. It's time to live like no one else, right? You've worked for this. Don't just sit in front of the TV and veg. I mean, go out and have some fun, especially your first 5 or 10 years, depending what age you are when you retire. You've only got so many years of good physical health where you can go out and do stuff. So go out and do it. Have a good time. Go fishing, go swim in the lake.
It seems like you're doing now, and it seems like commandment number 9. You've gotten down now.
I mean, I'm you guys called, right? I mean, I've been a long time listener, and for those that don't know, I drove 4 hours up here this morning, and I'm driving 4 hours back.
That's
tonight,
crazy.
Right?
I hate that you
what? It's because I've got the time, and to me, this is fun, right? I'm having fun, so I won't be enjoying it on the way back. But but the point is, pursue things that interest you.
Yeah.
And this was one of those things. So yeah, just do it.
I love it.
The good news is when you do these live shows, I worry for you because you get pretty pumped up about it.
Yeah.
But then you crash pretty hard too because the energy is pretty high when you do these live shows. So hopefully you'll have a good drive.
I've not had an issue with lack of energy though. I think I'll be okay.
Number 10, I thought this one was good. One of the things I tell anybody who is starting a new business, who's doing anything big in their life. I mean, we don't talk about religion a lot on the show because we don't talk about politics. We don't talk about religion. But I will tell you, I think one of the biggest things you can nurture in yourself is really your spirit, your soul. You need to have that stuff just quenched and nurtured because you never know what's coming. So you'd keep eternity in mind. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, and it's exactly that. We talked about the wheel and the spokes, right? I mean, you've got to have a spiritual side. And I'm like you. I don't talk politics. I don't talk religion. But I'm not going to do the 10 most important things for my retirement without addressing this. I think it's too important. And if people get offended, fine. It's important to me. And I think you absolutely have to recognize that there's more than what we see here. And that's what really matters. So as you're going through the good and the bad here now, just remember that there's a longer term thing.
Yeah.
And, I think in our case, we're a Christian family and it's important to us. And so, I put it on my 10 commandments.
Well, I think loving on your spiritual side also allows you to have reflection. It also allows you to know when you can't control things that there's something you can use to lean back on.
Yeah.
But it really cool stuff. And I know I want to kind of, before we kind of close the show out, is there anything, you're 100 days in now, I read your post, your blog post at theretirementmanifesto.com. We've asked you to give us tips, tricks, but is there anything else that kind of we haven't been able to cover today that you're like, man, I got to make sure I share this with the Money Guy family? I
think the one key thing that I've learned over the last 3.5 years of really seriously preparing for retirement, the goal of this is thriving and what was the title? We joke.
It was thriving,
surviving and thriving.
Surviving and
transition
thriving.
So
you read it.
To really get the thriving part of it right, I think the best thing we did, and I'm glad I read it somewhere, and now that I've lived it, I've seen that it's true, is really spend some introspective time, especially 2 years or so from retirement, really start thinking about this stuff and don't just focus on the financial side, really focus on the softer stuff.
Sure.
That's probably the biggest takeaway from our time. So
I put one more note on here, but I feel like you've already done a good job, and I want to give you a second longer. I know we're running a little long. Is that anything you want to share about what's going on with the Retirement Manifesto and directions? Or you've done a good job of plugging throughout the show, but I didn't know if you still want, if there's anything else you want to
guess,
tell our audience.
The only thing I would say is if you're looking at retirement or you're in retirement, this is just one family's journey, and I just like to write about it. So if you're interested, if you go to my website and sign up, you're talking about the deliverable. We talked about net worth. I've got a net worth template that if you subscribe, there's a little pop-up thing and it'll say sign up and you get a free net worth template.
Yeah.
If you're not tracking your net worth, track your net worth. I make it easy.
Preach it.
Yeah, that's a really
We're right there with you.
That is the most important financial metric.
And since you said that, I just think this is so valuable for our audience. Brian, if there's one thing that you regret in your financial journey, what is it? And I know what it is because it's selfish for me, but it has to do with what he just said. Is there something maybe you wish you would have started doing from like age 21?
Well, you're talking about the net worth there, aren't you? Because you know that mine starts, I think we figured it out, but mine starts in my early 30s.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I regret that I don't have something from my 20s.
Yeah.
Now, when did yours start?
92, so I was 29 years old.
20, okay,
So you probably had me by about 3 or 4 years, but I do have huge regret because I've used it as a tool because Bo and I are close. I mean, business partners, I like to consider I mentor you a little bit. And it's fun that I can go back and look, but I have some missing gaps for other people who are at the same age. Yeah. So I would tell you, if you're not doing an annual net worth statement, and then what's cool with it is you get older and you start to get traction with your assets growing. Y'all know some of the games you play is that you try to see, is your change bigger than your income?
That's
I
right.
mean, there's also tracking your liquid assets versus your debt.
And then debt pay down.
There's just all kind of fun little nerdy games you can do.
Tax status. I keep tax status in my network.
I mean, here's what I do to try to keep the number realistic, so I don't, because a lot of us are retirement rich. I put deferred taxes on mine. That's taking it.
As a
I
big
put deferred.
liability.
You can tell we're nerds. We're talking about all the stuff we put on there. But I definitely think the net worth statement is a tool that can power things. Now, guys, we're going to close this out. I know we have some Q&As to do on the live show. So if you're not checking us out on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, there's lots of opportunities. Every other Tuesday, we do this live now. You still tune in on the Fridays and get the content. But we're doing a little bit extra. And also, remember, give us your email address.
That's right.
Go out to moneyguy.com. We want to be able to share this deliverable we have, because we also have some cool announcements that will be coming down the pipe with free giveaways as well as other things. And the first place you're going to find out about it is by giving us your email address so you can go check it all out. I'm your host, Brian Preston. Here's the other thing. We never share. We also like to remind everybody this whole abundance cycle. We are financial planners by day. You know, I'm a CPA, a reformed CPA that's also a CFP. I always pick on Bo because he's a certified financial planner as well, but he also is a chartered financial analyst. I mean, he's really nerdy with numbers. We do this by day, and if you like what you hear, because we've been doing this since 2006, we started very similar to the Retirement Manifesto, is that we wanted to share the good news of good financial advice. It was a passion project. We kind of stumbled across the fact that a lot of people liked the message and realized they wanted to work with us. So now we work with clients in the majority of the country. If you like what you hear and you want to say, hey, I'd like to reach out with you guys, go to aboundwealth.com or moneyguy.com, and we have contact us pages. You can reach out to us there, and we love to take the relationship to the next level. That's our gift to you for giving away all this free advice over the years. Bo, anything else I missed?
Yeah, stay tuned. If you're out there with us, by the way, Steve Scoville said hello. He's an old high school buddy of yours. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Again, that's beautiful. So stay tuned. If you're out there with us live, we're going to do a Q&A with Fritz into the show. It's not going to be out there anywhere else. So if you want to be a part of it, I just have a haunting suspicion Brian's going to give away a bunch of tumblers.
If you want tumblers, you got to come to the live show.
And so, hang out with us after the show, and just thank you so much for letting us be. And Fritz, thank you so much for being here with us. This has just been absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and it's fun for me because I followed you guys or listened to you for so many years. You actually helped me get to where I am, right? I mean, I was listening to you
cool stuff.
way before I started blogging.
You're trying to make the hair stand up on my arm. I see what you're doing.
We are making a difference, right?
Yeah,
and I appreciate you guys having me on the show. It's a real honor. It really is. So thank you very much. Even though you called me a nerdy specimen or whatever it was.
It takes one to know one. So, thanks so much, guys. We'll talk to you soon.